Dream. Dream about the impact you could make. The impact on people you pass by in the mall. The impact on your neighbors. The impact on your friends. The impact on your family. Dream about the tremendous impact you could make in our communities. Dream. What if we could have an impact that spanned beyond our generation? What if we could transform the face of our cities? What if we could touch the lives of thousands of people? What if we decided to pray, invite, give more boldly than ever before? Are you ready? Are you ready to boldly embrace the mission in front of us? Are you ready to truly be bolder than ever?
Well, I got to tell you, I am so excited that you're here today at one of our campuses in Aurelia or Barrie or watching us online or via podcast. I'm so pumped because we're in a season that I think is going to define more than just the season we're in and more than just our future. I think this is a moment that could echo for years and years and years, maybe even more than a generation. We're in the middle of a series right now called Bold, and here's our challenge for you as individuals, for me, for us as a team, for us as a church together, is our challenge is to become bolder than ever. And it's something that I hope for you, because here's the reality. The opposite of bold is normal. And a lot of our lives are just kind of average and they're just kind of normal. But I'm personally excited for you because I believe that if you become bolder than ever, God is going to write an incredible story in your life. And this is a moment for us as a church, and I'll just tell you where Bold came from. We are pushing our 5th anniversary. Very, very soon, we're going to be 5 years old as a church. And earlier this year, we sat down as a leadership team, and we just asked the question, because things are going fairly well, and we have a lot to be thankful for, and many of you are new to church. In fact, the majority of our growth comes from people who don't have a church background, and we're grateful for that. And there's a lot of things that would just say we could just keep doing what we're doing. But we know that when we challenge the status quo and when we sort of rethink normal, great things can happen. And so we said, God, we started to pray, we started to ask questions. God, what do you have in store for us as people? But what do you have in store for us as a community as we move past our 5th year together as a church? And that's where the vision for Bold came from. And Bold for us as a community, I think, is going to be an exciting moment. And we'll have an opportunity, I think, to do things that a lot of churches don't even get the chance to have a conversation about. And I'm not just excited about us as a church. I'm really excited for you. Because I think this is more than just about what we can do together. I think this is about something that God wants to do inside you. That when you look at your life and you think about, okay, where am I going to be 5 years from now, 15 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, whatever stage of life you happen to be at. Maybe you're a teenager, you're finishing high school, or you're in high school, or you're in college, or you're getting married, or just getting established in life, or you're in the middle of life, or maybe you're retired. I mean, we all think about the future. I think it's when you get bold that you really begin to have a story that's remarkable. And there's something inside you and there's something inside me that says, I want my life to have some kind of significance. I just don't want to be average. And I mean, none of us really want to be average. It's not that we're trying to be, all full of ourselves or anything, but you don't really want to live an average life. You think you were put on this planet for a reason. And it's when we get bold. In fact, it's when we get bolder than ever that God can begin to use our life in a really powerful way. So I'm personally excited for you, and I'm really excited for us that if we embrace this moment boldly, I think incredible things are going to happen. So as we ask those questions as a leadership team, and we involved lots of people in the process, and we started to imagine and dream about, God, where do you want us to go as a community? We came up with 4 bold moves that we feel called to make as a church over the next couple of years. Bold move number 1 is simple. We want to secure a permanent facility. We love Portable Church. I love Portable Church. I think Portable is going to be a permanent part of our future in one capacity or another. But at this point, we're a fairly large church to be 100% portable. And as we look into the future, we don't imagine being, permanent facilities everywhere, but we want to have one permanent facility that will serve as a central hub for all of our future ministry and everything that God wants to do through us. We want it to serve as a campus for one of our campuses, but we also want it to be a place which sort of becomes a headquarters or a hub for all of the things that God is going to do for us. We want to reach more people. Our vision is going to stay the same. We want to be a church that unchurched people love to attend. We really want to be that church. And that has been a part of our story over the first 5 years of our life together. In fact, as I said already, the majority of our growth has come from people who didn't really have a church background. You'll hear some stories about that today. It's exciting and it's moving, and we want to reach more people than ever before. We want to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. And having a permanent facility is not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. It's just going to help us accomplish that goal more. Now, there's a financial target that we have for this bold vision, $2.5 million. The majority of that money, but not all of that money, is going to go towards securing a permanent facility. That's about $2 million of the vision behind Bold. And I know that's an awful lot for us, but I'll tell you, it's possible. Bold is going to be an all-skate, and this is why I'm so excited for you. It's going to take all of us to really be able to secure the kind of facility and the kind of vision that God has, I think, prepared for us. So we're excited about that. And about $2 million of the $2.5 million behind Bold is going to go toward a permanent facility. Well, what's the other money for? I'll tell you, a couple of other bold moves that we feel called to make as a congregation. Bold move number 2 is an enhanced portable campus. We're going to have portable campuses moving forward, and so we want to enhance the campus that remains portable. What we mean by that is some of the gear is 5 years old and it needs replacing, but we also want to reimagine. We've done portable church for a few years. How can we make the environments better? Better for your kids, better for your teenagers? How can we make them better for your friends? And what can we do to create and refresh our portable environment? Now, I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about what comes next. Bold move number 3 is launching an online campus. So far, our podcasts are watched actually by many people who attend our church and thousands of people who don't. We're grateful for that, but you can't really get access to what happens here on a Sunday morning. In fact, it's only if you attend our campuses in Orillia and in Barrie that you get to see the whole thing. If you're one of the people who watches us online, you never see the band, you never see the baptism stories, or rarely do you see those. You don't see the fun games or the videos that we run. You don't see that yet because we're not yet ready to launch an online campus. Bold is going to make that possible. And for some of you who attend our campuses, you've got friends that you've been praying for, and you've got friends that you've been investing in. And I'll tell you, you're like, would you come? And they're kind of like, I don't know whether I want to come. I'm not sure I want to come. And you're like, if I could just show them what it's like on a Sunday morning, I'm pretty sure they would come. Well, that's what an online campus is going to allow us to do, is you're going to be able to say to your friend, well, just tune in. Here's the time, and you can just go to this website, and you'll see it. And when they see it, they'll go, oh, I didn't know church could be like that. See, one of the reasons so many of you were hesitant to come to church is you didn't have a category for what church could be. Well, if you could see that before you came, and so many of you have told me, if I'd known this is what it was going to be like, I would have come earlier, like I would have come sooner. An online campus makes that possible. And for those of you who do watch our podcast or who watch our messages on our website, it allows you to not only see the whole experience, but to engage in the whole experience, because we're going to be able to use social media and other devices to have you kind of sign in, identify yourself, start building relationships with you, get to know you, secure online groups and more. So an online campus is the third bold move. And the good news is it's not that expensive. It's somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 depending on the configuration. That's a lot of money, but when you look at what the church is capable of doing together, it's not that much. So that's exciting. Now, that also paves the gateway to the fourth bold move, which is an expanded ministry. We are so incredibly grateful that so many of you have a vision that extends beyond yourself. And some of you actually drive. You drive like half an hour, 20 minutes, 40 minutes to get to Connexus on a Sunday morning. And that's awesome. But you know what? That's something Christians do. Non-Christians don't drive half an hour or 40 minutes, particularly early in the morning or in bad weather, to get to church. They just don't. They'll go if it's 10 minutes away. They'll go if it's online. When we started Connexus, we didn't want to stop at 2 campuses. And so, like many of you who drive, you're thinking about, well, what about my friends? What about my unchurched friends? We want to give you the opportunity to be able to invite your friends and to start experimenting and to start organically birthing new campuses over the next few years. And we'll talk more about that later in the Bold series. So that's kind of the Bold vision. And I'll tell you, when I think about the future, that gets me excited because what God has done in your life and what God has done in so many lives, he wants to do in other people's lives as well. When we started Connexus, we knew that Barrie and Orillia have great churches. But they're churches, for the most part, that church people love. We wanted to create something different. We wanted to create a venue that not only church people love, but that unchurched people love to attend. And that's been the story for so many of you. So Bold expands that vision, and Bold makes possible for more people what has been possible for those of us who call Connexus home so far. So we're excited about that. We're pumped about it, and we hope that it's something that all of you get excited about. Now, for this to work, I'm just going to level with you. As your pastor, I can tell you, it's going to take all of us. It's a daunting vision. It's a big vision, but it's possible if all of us pull together. And so one of the things I want to just start by being completely transparent about is Bold is possible if we all commit to it. If it's something like if you're sitting there going, well, I hope somebody does this, or I hope, maybe the leadership will do it, or the guy sitting in front of me, or maybe the other campus will do it, or maybe there's somebody online who can fund this. If you're thinking that this is something somebody else can do, the vision won't be realized. But if this is your home, if this is your church home, if all of us at some level engage and dig in, this becomes not only more than possible, it becomes probable, and it becomes a dream that you and I are going to have an opportunity to participate in. And I'm excited about that. So I'm asking you today, will you commit to participating in Bold? And we'll explain over the next few weeks what that looks like. So the truth is, it's going to take all of us because I can't do it by myself. I don't have the resources personally to pull this off. I can't pull this off. Our leadership team alone can't pull this off. But if we all as a whole community work together for this, incredible things can happen. Now, that's about us. But let me tell you why I'm so excited about it for you. I'm so excited about it for you because I think this is going to push your personal boundaries of what's possible. See, a lot of us, Bold, if we think about Bold is an attack on normal. I think for a lot of us, our lives are pretty normal. And when you look back at the end of your life, you're going to go, I kind of wish I had done some more things. I wish I had taken some risks. I wish I had grown more in my faith. I wish God had used my life in some way that maybe he hasn't. See, when you push the boundaries of what is possible, that's when God really makes possible things in you that you didn't think were possible. And I think this is an opportunity not only for us to grow as a congregation, but it's an incredible opportunity for you to grow in your faith. For some of you, that might mean in this process, you become a Christian, or you're at least like, okay, that's a story that I've got to wrestle down. That's a God that I've got to take seriously, and it may actually kickstart your journey. For some of you, you might become a Christian in the middle of this. For those of you who've been Christians, particularly for those of you who say, I don't really know the last time I've grown, man, if you want to engage growth personally, this is a great opportunity to do it. And I want to tell you why. Because Bold is going to push your fear. As you heard that vision, there was something inside you, and I promise you as a leader, there is something inside me that kind of went, well, that's good, but that's kind of scary. I mean, first of all, there's the big dreams. I mean, some of us are afraid to dream big dreams for ourselves and in our lives. You could just go on with the status quo. It's a big vision. It's a really big vision, and it's going to take a lot of us. So that part's scary. The other part that's scary is there's a financial component to it. And a lot of you, when you hear money, you're like, oh, there's the church. They're talking about money again. I can't believe it. But I want you to drill down on that. Because my guess is underneath your resistance is a fear. And if you really want to grow spiritually, the best thing that you can do is to engage your fear directly. When you begin to go, okay, how come every time they talk about money, how come when they talk about praying, how come when they talk about inviting other people, I get scared, I get afraid. If you'll engage that fear, if you'll look at it, I think that's when you can grow, because here's what you already realize. When you look back on your life, this is going to be a bold moment for us as a church, and I hope it's going to be a bold moment for you as a person. But this is what I believe you'll already see, and you already know this. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're not a Christian, you already know this. Your boldest moments are your best moments. I just want you to think back over your life. Your boldest moments have already been your best moments. That time when you were a kid and your brother fell in the pool and he didn't know how to swim, and you jumped in and you pulled him out. Bold. But one of your best moments. That day that you popped the question and you were sweaty and you were nervous and you didn't know whether she was going to say yes, and you had to get up all your nerve and you had to sell your car to buy the ring and all that stuff, and you popped the question and you're like, will you marry me? Bold moment. In my case, one of the best things I ever did. Your boldest moments are your best moments. That time when you forgave him. And it wasn't because he came and he said, I'm so sorry and I'm going to change my life and I apologize and I never should have done that. In fact, he kept doing what he was doing. But you had lived with this weight for so long that you said, okay, God, I need the courage to forgive him. I don't think I have that in me, but I'm just going to choose to do it. Whether it has an impact on him or not, and you forgave him, that was bold. But your boldest moments are your best moments. That day when you said, you know what, I'm going to start out on my own. I have this idea for a company. I have an idea. I'm just going to start my own business. You were so nervous and you put everything into it, and now you look back on it and you're like, oh, one of the best decisions I've ever made. And for some of you, you got bold when you came to church. Your neighbor was stubborn to the point of almost obnoxiousness. And you were like, I'm never going to go to your church. I'm never going to go to your church. And then finally you just gave in. You know, maybe he'll shut up if I just go to your church. So you went to our church and you were shocked. And a year later, you got baptized and you couldn't believe that you were getting baptized. And it was bold for you to show up. It was bold for you to go, this God thing, is this really for me? And it was bold for you to be baptized. It was bold for you to decide to follow Jesus. But for so many of you, that's been your story. And when you look back on your life, this is true whether you're a Christian or not. Your boldest moments are your best moments. And I think that you have the opportunity to take your life from what it is to what it could be if you will engage some bold moments over this season together. So you get to grow, but we get to grow as a church. Now, just a heads up, if you're going to get bold, it is going to push your fear. There's never a moment where it's kind of like, I'm living bolder than I ever did before, and you didn't overcome some fear. If being bold was easy, everybody would be doing it. And this as a congregation is going to push our limits. This is going to push you. It's going to push me. It's going to push us. But I believe our boldest moments are our best moments. And when we wrap up this series in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about a story that's worth living for. And I think when you realize this, you look back over your life, you're like, I want my life to be about something significant. I want my life to be about something that matters. I don't want to just live in vain. There's something inside you, and I know you don't want to be famous or you don't want to be this, but there's something that says, I want my life to really have some kind of trajectory. And some of you are crying out, God, I want you to use me. Those of you who are Christians, you're like, God, I want you to use me in some meaningful way. It's when you get bold that God starts to use you. Now, here's a heads up. If you really start praying those prayers, it's going to engage your fear. And when God uses you, he writes incredible stories, but it's dramatic. And we're going to tell a story about the launch of Connexus this morning at the end of the message that I am so glad you get a chance to hear, because it's a story that we really haven't told, a story that not a lot of you realize happened, and a story that those of us who helped start the church were reminded of as we kind of went up against our 5th anniversary and started, looking about what's next. We thought back to those first few months, and Connexus almost didn't happen. There was a series of events that we'll tell you about at the end of the message that almost didn't happen. And when I was in that moment, There's a guy who had this dream of starting a non-denominational church and, a church that would be for people who didn't attend church and a church that unchurched people would love to attend. It almost didn't happen. And more than any other season in my leadership, I felt like the story we're going to read. This is from Exodus chapter 14. And it's a dramatic story. It's a story of God's people in the Old Testament, the part of the Bible before Jesus. And they were at the threshold of becoming a great people. It was really the birth of a nation. And the nation had started centuries earlier under Abraham. Abraham had a son, Isaac, and then Jacob. And Jacob had 12 sons, and they became the 12 tribes of Israel. But for a number of generations, in fact, over 400 years, they had fallen into slavery, and they were slaves in Egypt. Now, Egypt was the global superpower. They were the China, the United States of their generation, and nobody had more power, nobody had more influence than Egypt. And the Israelites, God's people, had been subject to slavery for over 4 centuries in Egypt. And God said, I've heard your cries. It's not good to be a slave. I'm going to take you out of slavery, and I'm going to deliver you. Now, the story, when God gets involved, it's never easy. It's always challenging, and that's why a lot of us, we kind of prefer normal. It's kind of more safe. It's more predictable. But when God gets involved, it takes you to the edge. And honestly, I hope that's what happens with you over the next month. I hope God takes you to a personal edge. I hope he takes you to a place where you're like, whoa, I don't know. But the story he writes is so compelling and so powerful. When you look back, you're going to realize that was a best moment. It was terrifying, but it was a bold moment, but I'm so glad I did it. And I felt like the Israelites here in this story, and I want to read it for you. And in kind of a strange way, I hope this is something you experience in your lifetime. And maybe you're setting up for that in this moment, in this season. So it's from Exodus chapter 14, beginning to read at verse 4. Verse 4. So says, and once again, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will chase after you. Now, Pharaoh is the king of Egypt. That's just a title. It's like the king, the prime minister. I'm gonna harden his heart. Now, if you were the people of God and you heard that, how would you be feeling about that? It's like, what do you mean you're going to harden Pharaoh's heart? Well, he can do whatever he wants because he's God. But what? He's going to chase after me? Okay, God, you just delivered us from slavery. We were supposed to have broken the back of Pharaoh, and now all of a sudden you're telling me that Pharaoh, the leader of the greatest superpower on the planet, is going to chase us down. God, I just want you to know at our prayer meetings, nobody prayed for that. Nobody prayed to be chased down by Pharaoh. Like, that's not the script. You're supposed to deliver us into this land, flowing with milk and honey? Isn't that what you said? We're not praying to be chased down by Pharaoh. But look at what God says in the next verse. I planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh and his whole army. So when God disturbs you, when God bothers you, when God pushes you into your fear, it's usually a sign that he loves you and that he wants to grow you. And that's what I hope happens to you, first of all, over your life, but secondly, in this season. I hope he pushes your boundaries. He says, I have planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh and his whole army. After this, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites camped there as they were told. Good decision. Verse 5. When word reached the king of Egypt, here it unfolds, that the Israelites had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. What have we done? Letting all those Israelite slaves get away, they asked. It's a great question, okay? Pretend you're Pharaoh. You're the king of the greatest power on the planet, and you've got all this free labor called slaves. There's hundreds of thousands of slaves. They produce what you want for bread and water. I mean, if you're the minister of finance, if you're the minister of industry and trade, I mean, economics 101, do not let your slaves go. Right? I mean, come on. Who's going to do that from a business standpoint? They, through a series of miracles and plagues that happen, they go, okay, you can go. Then they wake up the next morning going, bad idea. What were we thinking? Let's go recapture them. So they set out. I mean, you do the same thing. I do the same thing. So, verse 6, Pharaoh harnessed his chariot and called up his troops. He took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with its commanders. Now, Pharaoh has some good chariots. Okay, he is a superpower. He's got his best guys. These are his Navy SEALs going after the Israelites. And I mean, you're an Israelite. You've been in slavery. Your father was in slavery. Your grandfather was in slavery. Your great-great-grandparents were in slavery. I mean, you don't have anything. You don't have an army. You don't have chariots. You don't have horses. You've got pool noodles. I mean, that's what you've got. That's the only thing we grabbed from the garage before we left. So you're in trouble. You're getting nervous. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So he chased after the people of Israel who had left with fists raised in defiance. Maybe you've done that before. You left the job you hated. It's kind of like, I'm never coming back here. Now all of a sudden they're coming after you. You're nervous. You're nervous. You're nervous. You're nervous. Verse 9. The Egyptians chased after them with all the forces in Pharaoh's army, all his horses and chariots, his charioteers, and his troops. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they were camped beside the shore near Pi-hahiroth, across from Baal Zephon. There you go. You can try that out at your next party. I know how to pronounce that. So away you go. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Why have you brought us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt?" It's a great question. I mean, that's what you'd be asking. It's like, okay, God delivered us out here. We're out of slavery. Now we're all going to die. At least there was a cemetery. That made sense back then. It doesn't make sense right now. And then they go on, why did you make us leave Egypt? What have you done to us? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? Some Monday morning quarterbacking. We said, leave us alone. Better to be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. Here's a good status update for your Facebook, right? Put that on the next day. It's like, better to be slaves in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. Told you, Moses, we're going to die here. We're going to die here. Now, what you don't realize when you're pressing up against your fear is that God is writing a better story. What you don't realize in that moment, if you never get to the point where you're anxious about your faith, where you're worried about your next step, you'll probably never grow. You'll just continue on. And for some of you who've been stalled out spiritually for a long time, it's just flat. That's why you haven't gotten bold. It's better to be a slave in Egypt, die to my dreams, than be a corpse in the wilderness. See, one of the reasons some of you are going to resist being involved in bold on a personal level is because you don't like the tension. You don't like the drama. It's a weird thing, though, because if you think about it, you're actually attracted to drama. In fact, this week you paid money to participate in drama. How do I know that? Because you probably read a novel, you watched a movie, or you watched TV. You're attracted to the drama in other people's lives. You watch the Avengers and they're blowing stuff up and saving people, and it's like, oh, what a great movie. You read the news because there's tension, there's drama. Who's going to win? Who's not going to win? How's this going to turn out? How's the rescue effort going? It's drama that you're attracted to. That's why gossip is so popular, why it's been around in every generation. It's like, do you know what she did? Do you know what he said? Do you know what? See, that stuff grips you. You are attracted to the drama in other people's lives, but you resist it in your own. Because when you pray, here's what you pray about: God, I don't want any drama in my life. I don't want to get sick. I want my kids to be safe. Don't let anyone break into my house. I want to be financially secure. I want to have more than enough. I don't want any drama. And then you can't figure out why your life is so boring. For a lot of us, it's like, okay, here's the story of my life. I get up in the morning, I brush my teeth, I have breakfast, I go to work, I come home, have dinner with the family, I watch TV, I go to bed, and then I wake up the next day and do it again. So would you pay money to see that movie? You wouldn't, because it's boring. It's boring. And normal is boring. And as a musician said years ago, the problem with normal is it always gets worse. If you just decide, well, I'm going to have a normal marriage, and you never go on date nights and you don't build that up, I mean, it just gets worse. The tension gets worse. Work just gets worse if you leave it normal. It's when you get bold. It's in those moments where you decide, okay, I'm going to do something. I'm going to attack normal. I'm going to move into my boldest moments because I want something great to happen. That you really begin to make progress. But the problem and the tension is you don't like it in the moment because it's addressing your fears. And if you're standing there as an Israelite and you got a whole sea, the sea of reeds in front of you, and you realize if I go forward, I'm going to die and drown. And if you go behind, you're going to get slaughtered by Pharaoh's army. You're terrified. And that's why you need to trust God. Because the story doesn't end that way. It's not how are we going to get slaughtered? How are we going to get killed? It ends this way. Moses told the people, verse 13, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. Wow. We have the biggest army on the planet down our backs. We got a huge body of water in front of us. Drown or slaughter. Drown or slaughter. How? Moses said, the Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. Some of you have never really experienced the Lord fighting for you because you've never been bold. You've never done anything that risked anything. And we're not talking about being irresponsible. We're not talking about being stupid. We're just talking about being bold. Where you begin to say, God, I got some fears around praying. I got some fears around inviting. I got some fears around giving. I got a massive fear around giving. And when you allow God to move in that area and you become bold, amazing things start to happen. And that's the opportunity in front of us as a church, but in front of you in your life. You see, on the other side of bold are your best moments. Best moments always happen on the other side of bold moments. And when you look back over your life, some of you would say, I don't think I've really done anything bold. I'm not sure I've ever been bold enough to trust God. I'm not sure I've ever been bold enough to honor God with my life. I don't think I've ever really done anything where I said, okay, God, I know what you want me to do. I read it in the Bible. I see it. Really? You want me to get bold? So here's what we're asking you to do in this season of bold. In fact, we gave you a card today I'd love you to have a look at. And on that card, it talks about praying more boldly, inviting more boldly, and giving more boldly. And if you could just show the card for a moment on the screen, you've got this when you came in. And if not, if you're watching online, you can download a PDF on our website to this card. And I hope you use it as a worksheet because I think this could bring a great breakthrough in your life, not to mention what could happen in our church. But as you plan to become bolder, plot out at least 3 best moments. Like, God, here's a prayer that I really want to start praying. Here's somebody I would love to see become a Christian if you're a Christian, or if you're not a Christian, somebody's life I want to see changed. And here's a bold moment I want to see in our giving, all right? And then use this chart to kind of write out some bold steps. So this is what it looks like. If you're praying, we want you to pray bold prayers. So you write down, I want to become bolder by, and then this one's huge. Reason why I'm not bolder. If you can identify that this week, that's where the progress is. That's where the breakthrough happens. Because if you can figure out, why do I not pray boldly? Why do I pray these little safety prayers? Why do I not pray boldly? If you can figure that out, my guess is there's a fear around that. You're scared of this nice little status quo that you built up being disrupted. And so you don't want to pray about that. Well, write your fear down and pray about it. And then say, okay, what do I need to do to address the fear? That's the action step. And go through that with inviting. Why am I so afraid of inviting people to church? And why am I so afraid about giving? See, I imagine us as a community becoming bolder in our praying, bolder in our inviting, and bolder in our giving. So how do you do that? How do you become bolder in our praying? I think one thing you can do when you become bolder in praying is pray your little safety prayers. Pray, God, protect my family, protect my children, protect my wife, protect our finances, protect this. Pray those prayers, whatever you want to pray, but then pray some bold prayers. And I believe prayer gets bold when you begin to align your prayer with God's known will. When I start to say, hey, my life isn't about what I want, it's about what you want. What do you want me to do with my life, God? That's a bold prayer. When you say, okay, I read in the Bible about people giving sacrificially, God, how do I begin to do that? That's a bold prayer. When you say, okay, I read in the Bible that you didn't just die for Christians, you died for the world, and you love the world. You love my neighbors, you love my friends, you love those people. How can you use me? If you want to know some specific bold prayers you can pray, here's a couple. You can pray for that friend that nobody else is praying for, that you think will never show up at church. Just get on your knees and pray for them every day. Because if you become a Christian, chances are somebody prayed for you along the way. So you be the person who prays for them and pray boldly every day. Here's another bold prayer to pray. I think you could start praying for a real estate transfer to happen in North America and the Western world. There's a lot of churches today who are sitting on billions of dollars of assets, church buildings, money in the bank, who have no people. And a lot of the churches that have people that are reaching, that are making an impact for next generation, they don't have a building and they don't have any resources. Pray that that generation will hand the keys over to the next generation. And we're in a good season as a church, and we're growing, and we're seeing people come to faith, and we're excited about that. But if I ever get, and my goal is not to get in that state to the point where I'm sitting on assets and people aren't coming anymore, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand the keys over to another generation of leaders, and we're going to hand over what God has given us to somebody who can steward us better. Just pray that would happen. Because churches that need the resources often don't have the resources. And churches that have the resources don't need them anymore. Because for whatever reason, their time has come and gone. Pray for a real estate transfer and an asset transfer. Pray for this. There are millions of people around the world, Christians, who are sitting on large assets. And they're not releasing them for kingdom work. They're just going to die with a lot of money. Pray that that gets released. Pray that we see the vision that has changed your life change thousands of lives. So those are bold prayers. You can pray more boldly. How about inviting more boldly? Well, what do you do? If you were here early at our services, you saw this little evangelism linebacker video that we ran pre-service, and it's a lot of fun. The guy in there is a guy named Derwin Gray. And he actually played football in the NFL. He played for the Indianapolis Colts, played for a number of years as a lineman. And he was somebody who really went into football. I met him recently, and we had a great conversation. And I said to Derwin, I said, what was that like playing for the Colts? I said, were you a Christian at the time? And he goes, no. He says, I'll tell you my religion at the time I got into the NFL. He said, when I signed with the Colts, football was my God. And the stadium was my church. And he said, every Sunday I went to worship. And I said, were you raised in a Christian home? Nope, I wasn't. And I said, well, how did you come to faith? Because he's a Christian now. And he said, I'll tell you how. He said, one of my teammates was a Christian. And he says, after the game, we'd all shower. And he said, then he'd come back into the locker room and he'd put a towel around his waist and stand there, put his leg up, open his Bible, and start preaching to his teammates. We called him the naked preacher. And I said, well, that must have been awkward. And he goes, awkward? Yeah. But he said, you know what? I wasn't a Christian, but I started listening to him. And he said, it was weird, but I realized pretty quickly that guy loves his wife more than I love my wife. And he's faithful to his wife. And he says, there's something compelling to that. And then I realized he loves people far more than I love people. And he said, we became friends. And then I accepted Christ. You know what he's doing now? 2 years ago, he planted a church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Started with 18 people. 2.5 years later, there's 2,000 who attend. Now, the naked preacher was bold in his invitations. And I'm not suggesting you should strip down to a towel and start preaching to your neighbors. I will visit you in prison if that happens, but I wouldn't suggest that. But you know, you don't know what's riding on the other side of your invitation. There could be a Derwin Gray. You have no idea what God is going to do in the lives of the people that you invite boldly. You just don't know. And what about giving? We need you to give more boldly than ever before. In fact, last week at our campuses and this week again at our campuses, we're giving you a commitment card because the $2.5 million we're asking you to give over and above your regular givings over a 2-year window. And we'll explain more of that. And I know this is where all the fear comes out and people go, I should skip this series or let's just come back at Christmas or whatever. I understand that. But if you drill down on this stuff and you really talk to God about why you're so scared financially, there is progress on the other side. And if you become bold in your giving, and you say, I don't really know whether I can trust God, I promise you, you will begin to trust God at a level you have never trusted him before. And as we were getting ready for today, I was thinking back to when we launched the church. As I said, Connexus almost didn't get started. We had a loan lined up to start the church, and it fell through. We're going to tell that story. Last month, I gathered a number of the people who helped us start the church, some of the elders at the time, together in a room, and we talked about that. And through the bold giving and the bold praying and the bold commitment of the people who started this church, we got going. But it almost didn't happen. And if it wasn't for the bold giving and the bold sacrifice of the people who started Connexus, you wouldn't be here today. And so many lives wouldn't have been changed. And I want you to hear what happened when we launched. Watch the screen. Back in 2007, there were a number of us who were already part of an existing church who just decided that we wanted to start a different kind of church.
A lot of the people that had originally said they would support it had dropped away.
And unless God parts the waters, I don't know how we're going to survive. I don't think any of us walked in with a solution.
Personal growth really starts when you start helping other people.
This appealed to me as an outreach for people who might not go to church.
I knew I had to do something.
You really don't have a promise other than change lives.
There was a point where we looked and said, wow, this may not even get off the ground.
We just thought it would be a great idea to create a different kind of church in a non-denominational setting in the hopes of reaching more people. Some of our friends, some of our family, some of our neighbors, but your vision, our vision was a lot bigger than that. We thought we could reach people that we've never met in different communities, and we would start this church that we ended up calling Connexus. And the launch date that we had picked was December of 2007. And so the fall of 2007 was really all the negotiations and all the work to try to get it set up so that when launch day came, we would have the gear that we needed to launch in the theaters. We'd secured a venue. We didn't even have the theaters secured when we started. And we really had to create something out of nothing.
In the fall of 2007, I was a stay-at-home mom. I've always been interested in spirituality, but I wasn't searching for anything at the time.
Fall of 2007, I just started my second career as a teacher and never been to church, hadn't even thought about going to church.
And 2007 for me was ironically a year where I had a lot of questions. So we had friends that lived across the street, Keith and Louise, and I constantly battered them with questions.
Yeah, I guess really for me, I've always been a bit of a skeptic when it comes to religion. I come from a very liberal home.
We had a private individual lined up to loan us $500,000, which would get us all of our gear on time so that we could launch. And I remember it was a Tuesday afternoon, getting the call from one of our core team at the time. And he said, well, you never believe this, but he can't lend us the money.
Was this the Lord telling us that, you know, we shouldn't go forward? Because everything was,
That's right, John.
you know, we kind of went, oh, maybe we've...
Not meant to be.
Yeah, it's not meant to be. And so I know we prayed about it.
I think basically the only conclusion we came to was we have to figure out how to raise $550,000 in the next 10 days.
At the end of the evening, we certainly came to the consensus that in faith we were going to go ahead.
I had, dabbled in Buddhism and Wicca and all of those kind of things, just trying to find what I was looking for. And at that time, I in a sense, I felt pretty good about my life. I didn't really feel like I needed anything.
I had been in Barrie for about a year and a half at that point. I was looking for a job. My daughter was starting kindergarten, I believe. Big changes for both of us. Spiritually, wasn't a whole lot going on in my life at that time.
I certainly was looking for something that wasn't there in my life. I was searching for something.
We did leave amazingly optimistic that night, despite really difficult circumstances. And I think we kind of came to that conclusion that we just had to go and talk to anybody we knew and the people that we knew that were in and wanted to start Connexus, and just ask them, look, could you do something? And we didn't know whether that was going to happen. And the money, I wasn't tracking it individually. I would just hear from some of our core team that were launching the church, hey, it was a good day. We saw another $10,000 come in or another $20,000 come in. And some of that was commitments, but it was really commitments that had to be realized in a very short window.
So I met a friend in the schoolyard, and she had just moved to Orillia. Her husband was the new campus pastor for Connexus. And Connexus was launching that December. I even remember the first one, actually. She invited me to the first series, and I said no, I wasn't ready, but I was really intrigued.
I met my best friend, Randall Pugh, in 1995, and God blessed me with an unbelievable relationship with Randall and asked me to go to Connexus a couple years back.
I was invited to come to Connexus by my friend named Amber Verity. She was going through some changes in her life and hoping that I would sort of follow in her footsteps and make those types of changes as well.
And I would sit out on the front porch, and Louise would come out, and I'd mosey over to her house across the street, and I'd say, Louise, I'd ask her a question, and she'd say, you know what, Jim, you can get that question. We'd talk about it, and then I'd go into great detail, and she'd say, well, you know what, why don't you come out on Sunday?
It was the White Flag series, and it was all about surrender and surrendering to God and a better way of life, and that was totally me. I was like, this series I felt like I was the only person in the church, and I felt like Carrie was talking to me, and I just kind of like put my head down and put my little white flag up and was like, okay, I surrender, I'm here. And I've been going back ever since. That was definitely the starting point for me.
It was Andy Stanley, but he was talking right to me, and that's how I felt, and it was like he was talking to me, and it feels like that every Sunday.
First time that I went out to Connexus, I believe it was the first or second Sunday in April of 2008. Carrie was talking about how we all have a hole in our heart and how it can only be filled by the love of God. And I remember sitting there, and I didn't even go to church, looking for God, but I sat there and I thought, how is he talking to me?
Andy came on, and he was playing the song Our God, Chris Tomlin, Our God. And when Randall, he held my hand, and when Andy started playing, whatever I was searching for, it was right there for me.
That night in particular, for the first time, I had to entertain around a table, or really a floor. We were sitting there like, okay, maybe God isn't in this. Like, we have to look at that. We have to pray about it. And 10 days later, we were on a totally different page. But that first year of startup was really, really difficult. And I think it was about 3 months after we launched where all of your well-wishers disappear. And people had given like they'd never given before, but then you still got to pay the light bills and you still got to pay the rent. that was getting difficult, where I thought, wow, we might not make it.
I always knew the Lord was going to manage it one way or the other, but I wasn't sure that he was going to move it forward. And I think there was a point where we just kind of, at least myself, I looked and said, wow, don't tell me we've gone to all this and for naught.
You really have no idea what's at stake, and you have no idea what God will do. And so if you get to that place of sacrifice, you get to that place of this one is going to be as deeper than anything we've ever done in our lives, and you move forward. You don't know what God is going to do through it. You don't know what God is going to do in you, and you have no idea what God is going to do next. And I don't think you ever find out until you engage at that level, like we did 5 years ago, because we had no idea what was at stake. We thought we knew, but we didn't know the people that we've met over the last 5 years. And I think there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people that will be impacted, and we just don't know, and we won't know until we go there. You know, I look back on that time, and I am so personally amazed and humbled at God's faithfulness, but also at the boldness of those of you who helped us start Connexus Church. I mean, you rallied in those 10 days in a boldness like I'd never seen before. And what I'm so excited about right now for our church is we have that opportunity right now to be bold again. In that you have the opportunity, those of us who started the church are going to invest again, I think at an unprecedented level, but so many of you get an opportunity to participate in that and see God write a story through you that only he could write. And we can see that together. If together we get bold, bolder than ever, because our boldest moments are our best moments. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity today that we have, and in this season as a church, to become bold. For some of us, the first time, I think for all of us, we have a chance to become bolder than ever. Help us to become bolder in our praying, bolder in our inviting, bolder in our giving than we've ever become before, because there is so much at stake. And we don't even realize the lives that we're going to impact. We had no idea of the stories when we were starting Connexus that we even saw in that short clip. We had no idea that there was something you wanted to do in those lives. It was just a hope. It was just a dream. And we thank you for your faithfulness. And we thank you that we get to have this conversation as a church. Thank you that you have helped us realize that life is so much more than what we think it is. Thank you for your utter faithfulness to us. And may this be a moment where we trust you in ways we've never trusted you before. In Jesus' name, amen.